Well, we're having some issues. Not good. Let's fix this. Hey everyone, let the omnification of Dark Souls 1 continue. With a very successful implementation of the Apocalypse system done, let's move on to the next system, my Predator system. If you don't know what that is, I will be providing a link to a general overview video describing what the Predator system is when that becomes available. In summary, it's my intelligent speed hack for the AI that allows enemies to get to you faster and thus murder your butthole faster as well. It's a game neutral system, just like the Apocalypse system, meaning it has been designed to be able to copy and be pasted into any game and just works. So we're gonna throw it into Dark Souls 1 today. All we need to do in order to do that is find the correct initiation point in the code. For the Predator system, the initiation point is going to be the place in code that is about to add a desired movement offset onto the entity's current coordinates, thus bringing about movement of the creature. So let's get to it. All right, everybody, let's disassemble and find the perfect place for the Predator initiation point. This will be somewhat similar to what we were doing for finding the perfect place for the initiation point for the Apocalypse system, as always. For that one, we located the area in code where the damage that was about to be applied to the player and where it actually adds that damage into the current health to make the new health. The Predator system, we need to find where it's adding the offset, the movement offset, that is it wants to apply to a creature's coordinates, and the place in code where it's adding it to that. This will occur before the actual coordinates are actually updated with a new value, of course, and so we're gonna have to dig for it. Let's start with finding where that is, though. Here's my coordinate X. Let's see what writes to this address. All right, nothing yet, because we're not moving. There we go, we got two functions showing up here. We probably only care about one of them. To figure out which one is the most important one, we're just gonna open up the disassembler, and if this is what actually updates our coordinates, then if I replace it with nothing, I won't be able to move. And I can't move, therefore, we probably want to focus on this one. So XMM0 will contain the updated and new coordinates for the player. However, this is past the point where we need to implement and insert the Predator system. We need to figure out where XMM0 is getting calculated. And it could be a few lines above, or it could be thousands and thousands of lines away from here. Let's just go ahead and just do ye old omni dirty chords access read trick first, which basically I'm gonna do in a very dirty fashion here by simply putting a breakpoint here, setting a condition so that it only will stop when the RCX is equal to the player's RCX. And then I'm making the character move here. Let's get him off to a little bit of a running start here. Okay, I'm moving. Let's look at our X coordinate here. I'm gonna see what's accessing the X coordinates in between rights. I wanna see what's accessing this X coordinate in between rights. So I'm gonna hit play here. And these four accesses were made in between rights to the coordinate. So one would hope that one of these reads is in order to do some math to it. If you wanted to add, 0.5 units to a coordinate, you would have that 0.5, and then you would want to know what to add it to, right? So let's take a look around here and see what we got. This is the one at the bottom here. I'm starting at the bottom because it was the last read, so maybe the last one that mattered. We got this fun looking function here. What I'm gonna zero in on here are any arithmetic instructions. I see one right here. Packed single floating point subtract. Let's set the breakpoint up here so we can get it to break on the right entity. And this one has the R9 register being used. Okay. Hopefully we're still moving. I can't tell, but this is now executing here. Well, I wanna now execute and I wanna see what happens to this sub PS here. I'm gonna open up the values of my floating point registers as well. Let's put a nice little breakpoint here then. And we're gonna use set RCX to be equal to that address in memory. So here it's gonna subtract from XMM3, which I do believe contains the current coordinates, these values here in XMM4. And are we gonna get a movement offset then that might be applied later? and maybe after it's tuned a bit, we will see. Of course, I don't want to do step into or step over because it'll release control again. So we're gonna put another breakpoint right here, right after it, put the condition on there, and okay, this looks like to me what I would expect to see when I'm looking at a movement offset calculation. Basically, there's gonna be a minus 0.05 change to the X coordinate and then a 0.01 change to the Z coordinate. One thing I guess we'll want to see then is if these coordinates update like that, bearing in mind that these might get padded a bit by some other code, but these are probably the base movement offset values, maybe? Let's see what happens. So this would become 12.87 or so. All right, there was a change here. It changed to 12.87, and I hate to sound very dumb here, but I don't remember what this was supposed to be. Let's see what it's gonna do. So I'm gonna do another negative 0.05 and then a 0.01. Okay, so 7.39 and then 12.82. Okay, so it has updated it basically to be very similar to what we're seeing with the movement offsets that we think is located here. So this looks like where we might want to actually throw in the predator initiation point. It seems to be calculating the difference between current and I guess desired coordinates, and then it seems to be applying that later on. Now let's see, let's remove this code and see if it prevents us from moving. So I removed what I thought was the movement update calculation or offset calculation. So it's not doing anything anymore. This is indeed the movement offset calculation code. It won't be able to add any movement amounts to my character's coordinates, and I can't move. Therefore, we found it. Fantastic. So we've disassembled where to put the initiation point. Let's actually implement the predator system. Well, I did some investigations into it, and unfortunately, this beautiful little insertion point here that we found only affects the player, and I guess potentially player phantoms, although I have not tested this. So we can't use this as the initiation point for the predator system. However, I'm gonna keep it and use it as a area code I can tweak the player's speed with, so it's separate from the predator system. I combed through all the code to find something similar for the enemies, and I just could not find anything in a reasonable amount of time. So what we're gonna do is an old dirty omni speed hack hook modification, implementation. I just like making up names. The way that works is it's actually gonna take place right at the site of the coordinates being updated, which I believe is right here. This x0 contains the new coordinates, and this is the place in memory that has our current coordinates. And what we do is we figure out the difference between the two new and old coordinates right here, and then we modify the difference, and then we take that modified difference and apply that to the coordinates. So in the context of the predator system, which one of the requirements it needs is the movement offset, we're gonna actually create our own movement offset. We're gonna do that simply by subtracting the current coordinates from the new coordinates. The reason why I stress so much to find earlier in the code the place where it actually does the calculation is in some games where there's advanced physics going on, like you can get hit if you start moving and there's like a force on you, you can start going faster. If you screw with the speed of the character right at the point of updating the coordinates, all these other functions of code that rely on knowing how fast the character should be moving don't necessarily get that update. And it can cause very, very, very strange things to happen, like the character can just phase out of existence. It's crazy. And I think with this game, however, I think it is basic enough, the physics and all that, that we can actually just apply the change here, and it should give us a smooth speed boost. So let's start writing the code for this. I've already created some hooking code into the predator system. Let's take a look at that here. So here's our predator initiation point. Write the update here. And I also saved the player speed boost. Just update that comment there. We'll leave this one alone for now. The important part is getting those enemies to go fast. So let's take a look at how we can call the predator system. So So here's the main predator function, and here are all the coordinates we need to pass to it. The first set of coordinates are going to be the player's X, Y, and Z coordinates. These are the player's coordinates here. The predator system affects the speed of the enemy based on where they are from the player, among other things. So we do need to have the player's coordinates discovered at this point. Those are the first parameters we pass. Then we pass the enemy's X, Y, and Z coordinates because that's gonna be affected by this. We need to know where the enemy is in relation to the player. And then we need to pass the height, width, and depth scale. Now, Dark Souls 1, like other FromSoft games that I've disassembled, which has just been Sekiro so far, actually don't have a native scaling parameter coupled with their coordinates. A lot of games have a scaling floating point multiplier that it's very easy. You just change it and to like a 2, and your character will be like 2 times as tall. I think it must be something that comes equipped on more common engines, like maybe Unreal, Unity, I don't know. But it's not in the FromSoft stuff. However, we're gonna need to know the scale eventually because we're gonna be implementing my omnification system, which will morph and make you feel like you're on acid while you're watching, changing the sizes of the enemies constantly and all that. For that, we actually are gonna be creating our own scaling parameter in the game, which is a fairly complicated operation. And we'll see that during the omnification implementation. We don't really care about the scale here because scale is not true scale in the game anyway. Scale in some games affects the speed of the creature if it has a true scale, which most games don't, frankly. True scale, whereas if I make myself 3 times as big as I normally am, well, I'm gonna be able to go faster, right? Because my leg stride is longer. I'm gonna walk faster than you're gonna be able to walk if I'm 3 times as big as you. That's true scale. A game I can think of that actually has that, right, is Monster Hunter, and it's gonna be in games where there's a varying size among enemies, and that's a feature of the game. We're playing a game like that, then we want to have accurate scaling parameters being passed here because we actually want to affect the speed boost based on how big they are. Because if I speed them up and they're already big, they're just so fast it's ridiculous. So for purposes of this game, we're just gonna be sending down an identity matrix of all ones because the scaled speed is gonna be the same as just the normal speed boost. And then here's the movement offset here. So we have all of these except for this. This is the only one we don't have here, the movement offset, and we're gonna just be creating our own by subtracting the current coordinates from the updated coordinates. So let's get all these parameters wired up. So as I alluded to earlier, there's a requirement of having the player's chords here. I suppose there's a chance that this could go off without the player's chords being initialized. I'm not too sure if that is a thing. And I think it might be if there's something moving right by you right at the start. So we're gonna wanna check for the player's chords and make sure they're initialized first. If they're not initialized, we'll get out of here. Once they're initialized, we do wanna check if it's the player who's moving, and we want it to skip out if it's the player being moving because they have their own movement update function, which is outside the predator system. So one day I'll add into the predator system something like the enemy apocalypse and player apocalypse. In the apocalypse system, I'll have a separate player module for it. But frankly, it's just a simple boost for the player if I want to change their speed, which I typically don't. Although if you want to see me make my player move fast, you can come watch me on Twitch, and you can always redeem some points and make my character move very fast or very slow. We're gonna need to provide an identity matrix for the scale. So let's just allocate a new floating point that is going to be the identity value. It's just going to be 1. The identity value, as I just said, is 1.0. And let's deallocate that here. So the very first thing we'll do, well, second thing I guess, is let's push our conditional flags and save those since we're going to be doing comparisons here. We don't want to screw up the state of our current conditional flags. And then let's see if our player coordinate structure is initialized. Let's back up the RAX register. And we're gonna use that to do our little initialization check. Let's move to RAX, the address of our player chords struct, or pointer. And then let's see if that has been pointed to anything. If it has not been pointed to anything, we wanna get out of here so we don't crash the game. Okay, now that we know that the player chords pointer exists, let's also then see if it's the player coordinates that are being updated here. If it is, we want to also get out of here. I'm gonna push REX again. Move to RAX, the player chords, and then we're just going to compare that dereference to what's in RCX. And if they're the same, then that means the player coordinates are what's being updated, so we want to bail out. Now that that's out of the way, we can go ahead and get those parameters ready. Very exciting. I'm excited. So what registers do we need to back up here? What do we need to preserve? Well, the Predator system is going to write to the RAX, RBX, and RCX registers. So it stores the updated change to the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So we're probably going to want to back all those up since they're going to be overwritten. So let's back up RAX, back up RBX, let's back up RCX. Okay, what kind of SSC registers do we need to back up? There will be a few. First of all, we're going to need to back up some just to do that operation to find the movement offset. Let's back up the XMM1 registers. Allocate 16 bytes in the stack, and we're going to store what's in XMM1 there. So we restore it right there. So we'll use that, I guess, to calculate the updated offset. Then we're going to need to push a few parameters, aren't we? We're going to need to push the player's chords, and we're going to need to push the enemy's chords. RCX currently has the enemy's chords, so that's good, and we'll, I guess, throw the player's chords into the REX. And what else do we need to provide? We need to provide that identity matrix, so we're going to need to free up another SSC register probably, and then we're going to push that movement offset. We'll add them as we go. Okay, let's first calculate the movement offset being applied to the enemy's coordinates here. To do that, we are going to take the current coordinates of the creature, which is an RCX plus 120, and we're going to move that to XMM1. All right, so let's move the creature's current coordinates into XMM1. It's at RCX plus 120. Then let's subtract the original coordinates from the new updated coordinates that it wants to set. Do a packed subtraction here. XMM0 will now contain the difference between old and new. So we can pass that as our enemy movement offset. So that reserves XMM0 as being a parameter. Now for XMM1, which was used in this calculation, let's store the identity, or use that as the identity matrix. And move to XMM1 the identity value. Then we'll broadcast on there to set every single word or floating point value on that register to be the identity value. Another parameter we'll need to provide is the characters or the player's coordinates. So let's prepare that. Let's have prepare REX to be pointed towards it. REX will be set to the address of the player's coordinates, and then we'll have RBX set to the address of the dereference player's coordinates. All right, this might be everything that we need. So the first coordinates, remember you have to read from the bottom up because of how pushing to the stack works, is the player's X, Y, and Z coordinates, 3 floating point values. So RBX is going to be pointed towards the player's coordinates. Our player's coordinates in this game, I guess due to the function of how the hook that we use works, is already aligned at the X coordinate, which is a bit strange for me, but it's how it is. So we're going to push the first 8 bytes of this struct by doing this. Push RAX. That will push the first 8 bytes, so it'll push the X and Y to the stack. And then we want to push the player's Z coordinate. It's going to be RAX plus 8. That'll push the next 8 bytes. It's a total of this many bytes. And the next parameter is going to be the enemy's X, Y, and Z coordinate. So we have the enemy's coordinates in the RCX. This one's actually aligned what looks like to be proper. This is already aligned properly, what looks like to me a more proper alignment. And it just made me realize that our player chords, because of the function of the hook, is aligned to the X coordinate. We actually need to get it to look like this if we want to do comparison here. So the way we're going to do that is going to look like this. where we're comparing and seeing if it's the player being updated here. REX right here is set to the address of our pointer. Let's also back up RBX for this. We're going to store the dereferenced address into RBX, like so. So RBX will now contain the address that is the address of the player's X coordinate in memory. Well, this is aligned 120 bytes off from that. We're going to want to actually subtract from that value that's stored in RBX, that address. We want to move 120 bytes down. So we're going to subtract from RBX a value of 120. So now, in order to get to the X coordinate for the player from RBX, it would look like this: RBX plus 120, just like it looks like it for the RCX value. So now we can do a comparison between RBX and RCX. So this should be correct. We'll double check when we're running it. All right. So I think back to this, we had the player's coordinates being pushed. Next is the enemy's coordinates. So we're gonna push RCX plus 120 to push the first 8 bytes. That'll be the X and Y coordinate for the enemy. And then we're gonna push the Z coordinate, which RCX plus 128. That's the first 2 parameters here. Now we have to push this identity matrix here. So we're using XMM1 to hold the identity matrix, and XMM0 holds the movement offset. So let's push the identity matrix to the predator function call. Now, even though it's only 3 values, right, the height, depth, and width, we're using an entire SSE register to hold this stuff. We're going to actually be pushing the entire SSE register to the stack. That's what it expects. So we're going to allocate onto that stack that has our parameters a full 16 bytes. Then we're going to move to the stack the matrix containing our identity values, which is stored in XMM1. And then the last parameter, which is the offset. This is a little tricky here. It expects it to be provided as if it was stored in memory with the address on a register. Meaning that if I just dump the SSE register on there, it won't be in the correct order. What we actually need to do is we need to allocate some individual bits onto the stack here. We're gonna allocate 8 bytes onto the stack. And here I'm gonna need I think I'm gonna need another SSE register to play with. So let's also allocate, up here where we're backing up data, some room on the stack to hold XMM2. Our calculated movement offset is being stored on XMM0, I believe, correct? Yes. So what we need to do is we want to move the high words from XMM0, so it's the 3rd and 4th values, to where the low words are on XMM2. And we want to push those high words first, then we push the low words. From the function's perspective, even though we're pushing in X, Y, Z in that order, the function expects then, because of how the nature of the stack works, to read it in the order of 0, or in the order of Z, then on nothing, 4 bytes, and then X, Y. So that's why we're doing this. So let's push the Z offset first. So let's move the high words that are on XMM0 to XMM2. XMM2 now has set as their low values the movement offset for Z, and then that rando value. Then we're going to move the lower words that are on our movement offset first, X, Y, and then we're going to move the Z. So then the predator function, when it's reading this, will see Z, whatever, X, Y in memory. So we're moving the lower quad word from XMM0 onto the stack. Oops. Allocate 8 more bytes. Now we're going to move the lower quad word from XMM2 onto the stack. And that's it. That's all wired up. All those parameters are loaded. This seems like a confusing way you have to go about doing things, but I guess that's okay. This is assembly. I'll just make sure there's proper documentation. It might also be easier to structure some of these functions to expect SSE registers being pushed to the stack, because I just find that easier to work with anyway, since you can push more data at once using SSE registers. That sounds like a good idea to me. Anyway, we can call execute predator here, and whammo, we have initiated the predator system for this enemy. So once this executes, the updated movement offsets for X, Y, and Z are going to be stored in the RAX, RBX, and RCX registers respectively. Now, in this kind of game, we don't want to boost the Y-axis at all, just because we're constantly kind of bumping up and down in this game when you move. And if we boost it, we'll probably fly through the floor, through the ceiling. The Predator system has a parameter we can toggle in order to prevent that from happening. I believe that parameter's name is skip boost Y. So that's enabled, so good. We don't want to boost Y here. So we need to take these returned offset values in RAX, RBX, and RCX, and we need to load them all back up into that XMM0 register. The easiest way to do that is to allocate, at least as far as I'm aware, is to allocate 16 bytes onto the stack once again. Let's use XMM2 as our, I guess, intermediary here. We're gonna XOR everything on there, basically zeroing it out. I'm just gonna then dump a bunch of those zeroed values onto the stack that we just allocated space for. And then I'm going to move to the first place on the stack here, the updated X coordinate movement offset, which is going to be in REX, or EAX as far as we're concerned. We only use the lower half of it. And then 4 bytes from there, we're going to put the updated Y movement offset. And 8 bytes from there, we're going to put the updated Z movement offset. And I can just load from the stack all those values onto our destination register, which is XMM0. Like so. Easy peasy. We'll get rid of this temporary little allocated space in the stack. And then I do believe that's it. All our memories are stored. XMM0 will contain the updated movement offsets. And we have the Predator system implemented into Dark Souls. We'll see if I did this correctly. We'll test it all right now. So sit back, relax, and let's see if enemies come to rush and murder me. Before we get to the demo though, there's also some parameters that you want to set that are pretty game specific, that are built into the Predator system, such as like what should the base speed be, what should the speed be when they get closer to you, etc. Right now I have it set to the parameters I had set Securo at, and I think given the similarity of the games, that might work out to be some pretty good presets. Frankly, for most games, these should be pretty good presets. But just for Monster Hunter World, I had to give it some special values. All right, so let's try out this code. All right, guys, we got the bugs fixed, and we're just gonna go over the changes that I had to make, and then we'll demonstrate the Predator system in Dark Souls. Very excited. The first fix I had to make was I originally had this here right by the player coordinates initialization check, where we check to see if the player coordinates has been initialized. I originally had this being set to jump if not equals. Well, then it would basically always skip all the code here if whenever this became initialized. So this is now correctly set to jump if equals. So if player coords, if that points to nothing, then and it equals that, then we want to abandon all hope and get the hell out of here. That was the first fix I had to do. The other thing that I had to do, that I was kind of operating under the mode of my traditional hooks, where I hook into the movement offset calculation code here. Execute Predator returns the updated movement offsets, right? And we took that, we processed it, and we loaded those movement offsets back into the XMM0 register. Well, the XMM0 register needs to be updated coordinates, right? And so this essentially caused things not to work. So instead, we want to take the return results from the Predator system function. We want to put them into the stack and load them into an SSE register. And then we want to take that SSE register and add that back to the original coordinates, because we have an updated movement offset that's been multiplied by X amount. So we want to get our new updated coordinates by taking that, putting that into the original ones. So XMM0 gets loaded with the original coordinates, and then we just add our updated movement offset, which is in XMM1 to that, and then we exit the function with XMM0 containing our new coordinate values that have that movement offset applied to them. So because of this though, we did need to actually back up the enemy coordinate address, because RCX, which is what it's stored in, it gets overwritten by the predator function, and we need to have it here though in order to load the original coordinates. So just here where I'm backing up everything else, we also just back up RDX and we set the enemy coordinate address. We store that in the RDX register as well, so I can reference it down here. Next, I screwed up arming the first parameter here, where we push the player coordinate to be consumed by the predator function. We get the address of the player coordinates here, then we dereference that, store that in the RBX register, and so then dereferencing this will give us the actual coordinates value. I mistakenly had this set to RAX, which doesn't make sense. It needs to be RBX. So this will push the XY, this will push the Z. And then finally, to fix that one funny video clip that you saw maybe a few seconds ago, we have to not only check if the player coordinate pointer is initialized, but we need to check if the values that it's pointing to, the coordinates, are initialized themselves. And when the map loads, everybody's coordinates are 0 actually, and not only 0 of floating point, but they're 0 like byte-wise. And it's gonna take those coordinates that are set to 0, and it's gonna move you to your initial coordinates, right? So it might move me to, x being equal to, or whatever, 10, 10, 10. Well, my predator function is going to, of course, see that there's been a change now from 0 to 10. It's gonna multiply that, it's gonna send you off hurtling into space, basically. So we basically prevent the predator system being called during those first coordinate initialization routines that the game does to set you to your initial coordinates. And the easy way to determine when that's happening is just to look at what the pointer, what we're pointing to here, and if it's set to byte 0, as in the x coordinate itself, then we're most likely being loaded and we're being put somewhere. Also, luckily enough, when the character dies and the game is being reloaded, the map's being reloaded, and we don't actually have a new coordinate address yet for the player, because that gets refreshed every time you die. Luckily enough, the game zeroes out the old one, and so this also detects when we're currently in the process of recycling the player coordinates struct. With all that done, it's now perfectly functioning work. Didn't take that long at all. And again, we'll be making a general overview Predator video sometime for you guys to watch, so you understand what's going on. So let's demonstrate it. First, we're going to see what it looks like without the Predator function enabled. Pay close attention. This guy's gonna start shambling towards me. This is without Predator enabled. Okay. See him shamble down these stairs. See, he's pretty slow like a zombie. He's not the slowest zombie in the world, but he's a pretty slow zombie. Come on, Mr. Zombie. So I can see I can easily outrun him. All right, guys, so let's see what it's like with the Predator system enabled. Let's see if we can outrun this guy still. Oh boy. See, he can easily keep up with us now. The enemy is definitely moving way faster. It's much harder to stay away from him, and those dashes he'll make towards us is gonna be lightning fast there. So there we go. Predator system's now enabled for the Dark Souls game. Oh my God, Jesus. That was fast. Stay away, get away from me. Get away from me! So much faster. This is gonna make some of the fights super exciting, I think. And it's actually a pretty stable implementation too. They're not bouncing all off, they're not phasing in and out of existence. I'm very pleased. Well, everybody, that's the Predator system implemented into Dark Souls. That's about then 60% done as far as omnification goes for Dark Souls. Very excited. Remember, if you like this content, if you're learning something, if you like seeing how I do my thing, please subscribe to my channel. Help me grow. I really appreciate it. Give the video a like if you liked it. If you got any questions, ask me anything you want. I'll be happy to answer them. And if you want to catch this Omnified gameplay live, the only place you're going to be able to do that is on my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/omni. So give that a follow too, buddy. Next video we'll be doing is the Omnification of Dark Souls, so I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a tough one because we have to figure out the scale. Then of course, once that's all done, it'll be ready to be played, and I like to do something new for each game I do. So maybe we'll figure out a new kind of hack too, something fun, something game specific, and we'll make some videos for that too. Till next time, see you guys, keep it real. Bye.